Hey everybody, it's GobletX and welcome back to some more Magic Arena. Today is the official launch of the Brothers War on Magic Arena, and they're doing a very cool Midweek Magic event that you should all check out if you haven't already. It is a free sealed event of the Brothers War. Now this is a Midweek Magic event, so it is a Phantom event. We won't be keeping any of the cards that we play with today, but this is a great place to get some practice in with the brand new set without having to put any gold or gems on the line. So without further ado, let's just bust open our 6 Phantom packs of the Brothers War and see how this sealed format plays out. Alright, so one of the really cool things about the Brothers War, as you can see here, is that there are retro framed artifacts. These are like the mystical archives in Strixhaven, where they are just a collection of really powerful or iconic artifacts from Magic's history, and they are not standard legal, but they are playable if you open them in your sealed pool or in your draft. So because of that, these are replacing, I believe, a common in the booster pack, so it's possible to get more than 6 rares in your sealed pool. As you can see here, we have 2 more rares that we're not showing off here because they're showing off our 2 retro artifact rares instead. So very cool. We have an 8 rare sealed pool. That's probably pretty great. So in the trenches, our first rare here, very, very strong card. It's going to be an Anthem effect, giving our board +1/+1 and a removal spell all in one. 6 mana to basically turn the In the Trenches into an Oblivion Ring or Banishing Light style exile effect until this dies. There's Goblin Charbelcher, a very cool classic card. This is a staple of the Goblin Charbelcher Legacy archetype. The idea of that deck is to play a deck with no lands in it. That way, when you flip the Goblin Charbelcher's ability and start revealing cards till you hit a land, you just reveal your whole library and do like 40 damage to your opponent. Obviously, it can't do that in Limited. You need lands to cast your spells here. You can't build a deck with a bunch of flip lands or anything like that. So, less good here, but still an interesting card, especially if we're playing red, but it's going to be very random. It's going to be all up to how many non-lands we hit versus how many lands, so very risky card, very coin flippy there. Drafna, Founder of Latnam. This is 2 mana for a 2/1, and for 2 mana, we can copy an artifact. Or sorry, for 2 mana, we can return an artifact we control to its owner's hand. And then for 3 mana and tapping Drafna, we can copy an artifact spell we control. So what that means is we can only copy an artifact spell, not an artifact permanence. Spells are what you call anything that you cast while they're on the stack. And then permanents are what you call them when they're on the board. So because of that, it means as we're casting an artifact, we can copy it and have that copy also enter the battlefield, but we can't do this with something that's already on the board, which is why it has the other ability there to be able to pick up an artifact we played early in the game and copy it later. So really cool card here, really fun one. This actually seems pretty powerful, although pretty slow as well if we've got some good artifacts in the deck. Then we have Mechanized Warfare, 2 red and 1. If a red or artifact source you control would deal damage to an opponent, or a permanent they control deals that much +1 instead. This seems okay. It's probably a bit weaker than In the Trenches. In the Trenches is going to work very similarly for us, where basically all of our creatures are going to be 1 power bigger. They're going to be doing 1 extra damage, just like they would with Mechanized Warfare. But within the Trenches, it's going to give all of our creatures +1/+1, even if they're not red creatures or artifact creatures, and it has a removal spell attached. With Mechanized Warfare, there are some other advantages to this. If we have some kind of red spell that deals 2 damage to each creature, now it'll deal 3 to each creature, so this is helping not just our creatures but our spells as well, but I still think it's probably a little more narrow for limited purposes since it's only helping 1 color worth of cards and artifacts. Mesmeric Orb is a very interesting card that is probably unplayable in Limited. It's 2 mana for an artifact that says whenever a permanence becomes untapped, that permanence controller mills a card. So it mills players very, very quickly. If you're lucky and you can get a well-timed Mesmeric Orb down, I guess it could be playable in Limited, but it seems a little narrow. It seems much more like something you'd want in the sideboard than something you guaranteed want. The magical Christmas land with this card is if your opponent like taps out some turn, maybe it's turn 7 or something, they tap all 7 of their lands for maybe one big spell or a couple smaller spells. Then it goes to your turn and you just drop a Mesmeric Orb. You know they're going to mill 7 cards at least, but you're milling yourself as well. You need your opponent to have more tapped permanents than you do for them to mill out before you. So unless you have like other mill in your deck, it seems a little risky there. And then last but certainly not least, we have Arcane Proxy, a very cool card here. 2 blue and 1 more for a 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, when you cast it, you can exile an instant or sorcery with mana value less than or equal to its power from the graveyard, copy it, and cast it without paying its mana cost. And then a 7 mana version of this card makes a 4/3 that lets you copy a 4 mana value or less card from your grave for free. So really cool, basically kind of like a colorless Snapcaster Mage here, a lot slower, but being able to get, a 4/3 body and recast a removal spell for 7 mana, pretty good deal. Very nice card. So we'll check out our last 2 rares here that we didn't get to see because of the retro framed artifacts, and hopefully there's some sweet stuff. But after that, we'll go ahead and take a look at our multicolored and colorless cards, see if anything leads in any particular direction. So we do have a Brotherhood's End as our 7th rare in red, which does work quite well with the Mechanized Warfare. As I was saying, this will deal 4 damage to each creature in Planeswalker if we have that on board. Very good little Wrath effect. It's very, very difficult to play around board wipes in Limited, so they tend to be pretty powerful cards, because if you can blow up even just 2 of your opponent's cards off of just this 1 card, that's already a 2-for-1, it's a good deal. And if you can blow up 3 or 4 cards of your opponent's, that's often going to completely swing the game in your favor, because you go up quite a bit in card economy and card advantage there. There's also Gix's Command, which is a pretty absurd sorcery. I've died to this a lot at the pre-release at my local game store. This is a 5 mana sorcery. You get to choose whatever 2 modes are the best for you at the time. You can put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature and give it lifelink till end of turn. You can destroy each creature with power 2 or less. You can return up to 2 creatures from your graveyard to your hand, and you can have each opponent sacrifice a creature with the highest power among creatures they control. So an example of how good this card is I've had my opponents have this. It's basically always good, because I've had my opponent have this in a situation where I had 1 really big creature and I just spent all my removal dealing with all their threats, and I'm like, all right, I'm home free. And then my opponent top decked the Gix's Command and was like, okay, you have to sacrifice your 1 massive creature, and I'm going to bring back both of the creature cards you just spent your removal on. And that basically immediately ended the game, completely flipped it in my opponent's favor. And then another game in that same round, I had the early aggro lead on them. I had some 2 and 3 drop creatures just getting in really, really well. My opponent had a decent sized creature as well on board, maybe a 2/2 or something. But they didn't trade it off, because when they got to turn 5, to stop all my early aggro, I think I had them down to 10 or something, they're like, all right, now I'm going to blow up your 3 creatures with power 2 or less, and I'm going to make my 2/2 a 4/4 with lifelink till end of turn, because the abilities go in the order that they're listed. So if you put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature, and it becomes larger than 2 power, then it won't die to the destroy each creature with power 2 or less. So my opponent got to one-sided board wipe with it and then gain a bunch of life off the swing for the turn, and it also completely turned the game around. So honestly, Gix's Command I think is the strongest rare we have here. It's a very, very good one, but In the Trenches is pretty sweet. Brotherhood's End is pretty sweet. Arcane Proxy is sweet as well. Draftness seems a little slow, but still pretty cool. The retro framed artifacts are a little narrow, or a little RNG dependent, a little luck dependent. And then Mechanized Warfare is only if we can get really, really heavy into red. But overall, pretty sweet rares. Now let's go ahead and see our colorless and multicolored cards, see if anything leads us in a particular direction there. So we've only opened one multicolored card here, the Sky Fisher Spider. 2 a black and a green for a 3/3 with reach. When it enters the battlefield, you may sacrifice another creature to destroy target's non-land permanent. So very good, very flexible removal there. It also gains you life for each creature in your graveyard when it dies. So really, really nice green-black card there. If we've got good stuff in green and black, we will definitely go for it. As for our colorless cards that will make it into probably any deck, we have Evolving Wilds for mana fixing. Energy Refractor is also decent mana fixing, but it does tax you a bit. You have to spend 2 mana to get 1 mana out of it. Would have preferred a Prophetic Prism reprint. That was a 2 mana artifact that draws a card when it hits the board, and for 1 mana and tap it, you get 1 mana of any color. But they went for a different design here, which is cool too. So those are definitely going in the deck no matter what. Well, Refractor doesn't necessarily make the cut, but it's very close. Pristine Talisman is going to be good if we have a lot of high mana cost stuff. Generally, if we don't need this mana, it's not very good to just gain 1 life every turn for a 3 mana card, but if we need the mana, then the life gains a nice bonus. Tower Worker's fine, Charbelcher's fine. Symmetry Matrix, if we have a ton of creatures with equal power and toughness, can draw a lot of cards throughout the game. Then some filler stuff like the Power Plant Worker. Steel Exemplar is really nice if you are very focused on one primary color, because this is a 5 mana 6/6 if you cast it with only 1 color of mana. Otherwise, it's a 5 mana 4/4. Alright, a bunch of options for sure in the artifacts, but nothing else that I feel like is a guaranteed card to go in the deck. There's also Millstone if we want to play the very long game. Mill plan, we can do that with a Millstone and a Mesmeric Orb. So let's look at our individual colors now. Starting off with white, we do have that In the Trenches being really sweet. Check out our other cards. Union of the Third Path. This is fine. A little bit expensive, but the card immediately replaces itself. It just cycles, draws you a card, gains some amount of life. It's like a more expensive version of like Revitalize from the past, which was 2 mana, gain 3, draw a card. That card was always fine. It's probably a little slow for my taste, but fine. Military Discipline. If we don't have enough non-creature stuff going on, this is a fine little combat trick. +1/+0 first strike till end of turn, and then the creature will permanently get +1/+0. Survivor of Corliss, this is probably unplayable. I mean, a 1 mana 1/1, not really where you want to be unless you're incredibly aggressive, and I don't think that the graveyard mechanic there is going to give it enough value to make up for the small body in the late game, so probably not running that. I've been impressed by the Phalanx Vanguard. A 2 mana 2/2 Vigilance already fine, and of course there's plenty of ways to put some artifacts on the board to get a little bit of extra damage out of it. Ambush Paratrooper's been fine. 2 mana 1/2 Flash Flying, so you can play it out of nowhere, block your opponent's 1/1, and later in the game, giving your whole board +1/+1 can be big. Warlord's Elite, never played with this one before, but it's an interesting one. 3 mana for a 4/4, at an additional cost to cast it, tap 2 untapped artifacts, creatures, or lands you control. So a 5 mana 4/4 at worst, because you can just tap 2 extra lands, and at best you can play it a little early if you've got some artifacts, some creatures on board. Medic's very filler, it's fine. I've enjoyed the Scrapwork cohort quite a bit. There's a lot of cards in white that are good when you make a wide board state, and In the Trenches is one of those cards giving all of our creatures +1/+1. So creatures that split off into multiple creatures off of one spell are pretty good for the white cards that we have, and Scrapwork Cohort does exactly that. 4 mana for a 3/1 and a 1/1 token, and then an Unearth later to get another 1/1 token, which is super sweet. Unearth, reprint mechanic in this set. It's basically giving your creature flashback. You get to bring the creature back from the graveyard to the battlefield for one last turn, and then it will exile itself forever if it dies during that turn or during the end step of that turn. So one last swing. One of the great ways to use Unearth that you'll see they've made on most of the Unearth cards in the set is to give them a good enter the battlefield effect. So even though they're only getting one last swing in, they're giving you something before they leave forever. Like the Scrapwork Cohort here is giving you a soldier before it leaves. Takaji's Onulet, another solid little unearther here. Kind of a big unearther, but still. 5 mana for 4/4. When it leaves the battlefield, you gain 2 life. And then, of course, when you unearth it later, you're swinging with a 4/4 one time and then gaining another 2 life when it exiles itself. Aeronaut Cavalry, 5 mana 3/4 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on another target soldier you control, so it can't put the counter on itself. And just be a 5 mana 4/5 flyer. That would be really sweet. But we've got some soldiers, it's probably fine. White looks pretty fine here. It's not massively exciting. In the Trenches is the best thing that we have going for us in white by a lot. And we've got Scrapwork Cohort that works pretty well with it. The Cohort works well with the Phalanx Vanguard as well. But a lot of filler in here for sure. Yoshin Medic, Warlord's Elite, stuff like that just seems okay. So white looks fine. Take a look at blue. Looks like we've got a lot of blue cards here. We've got the Drafna, founder of Latnam. Gonna be good if we play a lot of artifacts. Thopter Mechanic is just a really good card if you can draw a second card. So the easiest way to trigger this card is going to be to draw one additional card during your turn. So if I have this on the board and I play an Energy Refractor that draws a card when it enters the battlefield, that will trigger this, give it its +1/+1 counter. This just seems like an excellent card in general, because even if we never trigger that first ability, you're getting a 2 mana 2/1 that gives us a 1/1 flyer when it dies. It's a really, really excellent card. Zephyr Sentinel, another excellent one. 2 mana for a 2/1 flying with flash, so playing at an instant speed. And when it enters the battlefield, we can return another creature that we control to its owner's hand, so we can save a creature from a removal spell to recast it later. And if that creature was a soldier, we also get a counter on Zephyr Sentinel. Card's pretty nuts. Pretty nuts stuff. Really, really good card. Wing Commando is great. 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer with prowess, so it can even get in for extra damage as we're casting non-creature spells. Latnam Adept seems fine if we have a lot of ways to draw a card. Pretty slow, so I'd like to have a ton of ways to draw a second card to run this, but seems fine. Retrieval Agent seems fine. Better version of that crab from the last set, just a 4 mana 2/5 that has a flexible little activated ability to up its power and win more fights. Koilos Rock's pretty nice. 5 mana for a 3/3 flyer, and we get a tapped Powerstone token to help cast a very big artifact like an Arcane Proxy, which is one of our rares. It's a pretty solid one, so we'll definitely play it. And then Hulking Metamorph is a very fun prototype card. The prototype mechanic making these cards more flexible. We get to cast the cheap version or the expensive version. So a 4 mana 3/3 that copies any artifact or creature we control, keeping its power and toughness, or a 9 mana 7/7 copy of any artifact or creature we control. I probably wouldn't run this in every deck. There are some of these prototype cards where the expensive part is strong enough that I'd play it in any deck regardless of color. This one, I think I would far prefer to be in a blue deck to run this. And we are in a blue deck here, so I'd absolutely play this card. Seems like a pretty fun one. But just thought I'd mention that there. Forging the Anchor is pretty bad. You need a really high artifact count for this card to consistently draw you at least 2 cards, and you're not really breaking the bank unless you're drawing 3 cards off of this. So you're looking at the top 5 cards of your library. So that's 1/8 of your deck. And you need to find 2 artifacts to draw the card off of this. Yeah, you need a quarter of your deck to be artifacts to consistently draw 2 off of this, which means you need at least 10 artifacts in the deck. And even then, you're going to miss sometimes. You're going to have only 1, which is really bad. I think ideally I'd want like a 15 artifact deck or something wild to run this card. Got Stern Lesson here. I like this one a lot. Draw 2 cards, discard a card, and create a tapped Power Stone at instant speed. It's very nice instant speed card draw and some mana production for your artifacts. Very important to note, the Power Stones cannot be used to cast non-artifact spells. They do absolutely everything else. You can cast your massive artifacts with them. You can pay for abilities like Unearth. You can pay for abilities like that on Retrieval Agent or anything else like that. So Power Stone's very, very useful. You can also use Power Stones to use Energy Refractor's ability. So if you have a really big non-artifact spell that you want to cast and you have like 4 Power Stones on board that aren't helping at all, If you have an energy refractor, you can use those 4 power stones to get 2 mana that you can spend on anything. So that's pretty cool. And rebuff is fine. So our blue looks really nice. I like our blue better than our white because it's more consistent. We have some really good 2 mana cards. Very solid 3 mana flyer. Just a very solid like blue flyers looking deck. And we still have a bomb in here. We've got that arcane proxy. Although ideally a secondary color in the blue deck has some better spells than the blue ones that we have there. Looking at the black now. Ooh, we've got some really, really good stuff in black. Gnawing Vermin is fine in this set. There are Unearth cards and stuff that would care about milling yourself. So Gnawing Vermin, more often than not, you play it, you mill yourself 2 cards for graveyard recursion stuff. Ashnod's Intervention's not great. It's very similar to the kind of tricks we've seen in sets lately in black, where you give the creature a temporary buff, and then when it dies, you bring it back to the battlefield. With this one, you just put it back in your hand, which is pretty bad. You're going to have to respend the mana cost on it. The idea here, the reason it's designed this way, is they made it a little stronger than before, where even if the card gets exiled, you get the card back. So in order to make up for that, you have to put it in your hand, because now you can use this on like an unearthed card, because the unearthed card usually it'll exile itself forever after you've unearthed it, but with Ashnod's Intervention, instead of exiling it, you put it in your hand. So it's cool, it's a fun design, but it still feels like it's not going to be great since you do put it back to the hand instead of the battlefield. So not a big fan of that. Ixian Infiltrator do want a lot of ways to sacrifice stuff to run this. I don't think we will. Thraxidemon's fine. 2 mana, 2/2 on curve. That later in the game lets us start sacrificing Power Stones or Soldier tokens or something to draw cards. Couple Powerstone Fractures are pretty great with expendable creatures like Gnawing Vermin. 2 mana, it's basically Bone Splinters. Sacrifice an artifact or creature, destroy a creature or planeswalker. The really cool part about this is if you have Powerstone production, obviously it's in the name there of Powerstone Fracture, then you can just sacrifice a Powerstone to blow up whatever you need, which is very useful. Battlefield Butcher is great for a long game. It's going to sit there making your opponent lose 2 life and blocking a lot of stuff with that 4 toughness. Couple Carrion Locusts for anti-unearth stuff is fine. Not in love with Gix's Caress, but we do have some good ways to use Power Stone, so it probably makes the cut. But I'm not a massive fan of discard myself. Moment of Defiance is a pretty big trick. If you cast it on a large creature, you gain 1,000,000 life and draw a card. Gix's Command is obviously incredible, and Corrupt is great if we are heavy into black as our primary color. I have drafted a mono black deck around this card before, and that is always a very good time, dealing a ton of damage to your opponent if you have like 7 swamps on board when you cast this. And I love Goring Warplow, very flexible, very nice card. 2 mana for a 1/1 Death Touch or 6 mana for a 5/4 Death Touch. So black, really consistent, really nice stuff there. I'm pretty into maybe like a blue-black deck or something here, but we still got to check out our red and our green and see what we've got going on there. Moving on to the red now. Very small creature count here, and the ones that are here aren't great. Blast Runner's very much for a dedicated sacrifice deck. I don't think we can pull that off. Forge Chanter is very filler. It's fine filler, but filler nonetheless. And then a couple Chain Dancers are nice with combat tricks and such, but not a lot of creatures in red here. Research Desk is fine, impulsive card draw. Bitter Reunion is fine card draw. An okay trick of Whirling Strike. Very solid removal here, Excavation Explosion. Raise to the Ground's just okay. We've got the Brotherhood End and the Mechanized Warfare, but there's not enough red cards really to make Mechanized Warfare pop off. Red looks a little awkward here. I don't like the low creature count. There are some pretty great spells here. Excavation Explosion, Brotherhood's End. And that's it for great spells. The rest are fine though, but yeah, red's a little empty here, a little dry. Just not a lot of cards in the color. And last, but it looks like not least, is green here. It looks like green provides us a lot of great ramp cards. So, don't know if I should play green, but I'm probably going to. because these are my kind of cards right here. When we look at the top end of our mana costs, we've got 3 Boulder Branch Golem, which is a very good card because you're going to play a 6/5 onto the board and gain 6 life when you do it, which helps stabilize against more aggressive strategies. You make up for the life that you lost early in the game while putting a creature on board that is too big for your opponent to easily attack through. So very big fan of that. Cradle Clearcutter is a beautifully flexible card for these green ramp decks. It's a 3 mana 1/3 that taps for a green, or a 6 mana 3/6 that taps for triple green. Got an Iron Claw Crusher here, another big card to ramp into. At worst, it's a 4 mana 2/5 that gives something +2/+0 every time it attacks, which means by itself it attacks as a 4/5, which is a really solid rate. And then at best, if you're late in the game, you've got the mana for it. A 7 mana 4/6 that does the same, meaning it attacks as an 8/6 by itself. Super big card. And then of course the classic Rust Goliath, just a 10 mana 10/10 reach trample, and I would like to live the dream and cast that thing. Or it's a 5 mana 3/5 reach trample. We then have 2 really good mid-range cards for stabilizing us, 2 Obstinate Baloths that will gain us 4 life when they hit the board, and they're 4 mana 4/4s. So a nice chunky body. It's hard to attack through that well with your cheaper creatures, and it makes up for the life lost in the early game while we're setting up our mana. So Obstinate Baloth is incredible. And then most of what else we have here is pretty filler. Perimeter Patrol. Blanchwood Prowler's fine. We mill ourselves and then maybe draw land out of them to help get to our expensive mana costs. Epic Confrontation looks pretty good in this deck. We have a lot of beefy creatures to fight with. And Mask of the Jadecrafter, another really fun ramp card, because we get 1 very big, just X mana XX off of this card, and then later unearth it and do it again. Get a smaller XX, but another one nonetheless. Giant Growth is a really efficient combat trick, so I'm a decent fan of it. 1 mana for +3/+3. Probably would play the 2 Giant Growths over the Tawnos' Tinkering. The Tinkering can do a lot more stuff as a combat trick. However, it is 4 times the mana cost, so it's much harder to hold this mana up and surprise your opponent with it out of nowhere. Not that hard to hold an additional just a 1 mana up after casting your spells. And then there's Philagi Excavation. I've never had this card be good. The idea is that it helps ramp into these big cards, but it just feels like I always draw it at the wrong time, where playing a 5 mana card that doesn't affect the board, it doesn't attack or block or anything, has often just been a death sentence for me. So I would probably still try to play it here because we've got a lot of big stuff, but maybe I shouldn't. So one thing I can tell you right now, this is the Phantom Sealed event, so it really doesn't matter how well we do. I'm going to play the stuff that I find the most fun. I'm definitely going to play green here, 100%. And I think even if it wasn't Phantom Sealed, I think green is one of our best colors with double Obstinate Baloth, triple Boulder Branch Clearcutter. Got a really, really nice end game in this deck, and plenty of life gain to survive the more aggressive strategies. So I think green's honestly one of the best colors in the sealed pool and probably should be a primary color in this deck. So throw all that green stuff in here. Was there any colorless stuff that works great with this green? Pristine Talisman can make the cut in this deck. We have a lot of expensive artifacts, so that helps get there. Symmetry Matrix can draw us a card off of Rust Goliath. If I have 11 mana, okay, that's not really something I should rely on, but it can draw us a card off of our 2 Obstinate Baloths, our Perimeter Patrol, and our Blanchwood Prowler. We've got 4 or 5 cards that trigger it, Mask of the Jadecrafter as well. Ideally, I'd like the majority of our creatures to trigger it, so something like 10, so I'll double check it after we put our second color in. We do have that Skyfisher Spider recommending green-black for us, and we have some pretty powerful black cards, Gix's Command being the really big one. We can't really use the Corrupt here very well, because it looks like green is going to be more of a primary color to the deck than black. We can use our other black cards, and they're pretty good. It's between black and blue here. Are we going to be green-blue or green-black? Let's find out. If we go green-blue, we get a couple more great options to ramp into, the Hulking Metamorph and Arcane Proxy, which is really cool. But if we go green-black, we have a little bit better interaction. We have Skyfisher Spider to blow up any non-land permanent. And we have Gix's Command being a huge piece of interaction, and a couple Powerstone fractures as well. So really good removal out of green-black. If I go green-blue, I don't honestly have a lot of great spells to copy with the Arcane Proxy anyway, and most of what I get is a bunch of flyers. Consistent curve for some aggressive stuff. I think I would rather just have a bunch of removal though, so I'm going to go green-black here. Put in the Gnawing Vermin, a couple Powerstone Fractures, Thraxodemon, Battlefield Butcher. Throw in the Gix's Caress, the Powerstone can be pretty valuable for us. Throw in the Goring Warplow, the Gix's Command, and that is a 40-card deck. You have a couple Carrion Locusts and Moment of Defiance as options, but I don't think I'm going to try to play Corrupt here. Let's see. So this is 43 cards right now, so we get to cut a few. Let's see our creature to non-creature, 16 to 10. 15-ish is pretty average, pretty good, so we can definitely cut a creature out of here and then focus on non-creatures. And we can count Mask of the Jadecrafter as a creature, so we kind of have 17 creatures right now. So I do think we should probably be cutting a couple of those. So Warplow's a 2-drop Death Toucher. Clear Cutter's a 3-mana mana ramp card. The rest of these we would ideally always play at the high mana cost. But we can, it's pretty reasonable to play these as 4-drops. Rust Goliath is the only one that I really want to play as a 10-drop. But that's just because I'm a doofus. A 5-mana 3/5 Reach Trample is still a pretty good deal. It's a Mammoth Spider, like really hard to get through creature there. Cut these Locusts. We have like no flyers if I do that, but I have life gain in this deck and a tiny bit of reach. And we definitely have removal. So cut a couple Carrion Locusts seems fine. A lot of big creatures, so Moment of Defiance can also be a really big life total swing, while being a combat trick that also draws us a card. So maybe cut one Giant Growth, so we can play one Moment of Defiance. Also don't really seem like we're a Giant Growth kind of deck. I'm not really trying to curve out really well in the early game and keep getting attacks in to where Giant Growth can win a lot of fights there. I look like the kind of deck I'm just trying to make it to the late game and then play creatures that are way bigger than my opponent's stuff where I don't really need combat tricks as much. So maybe we cut 2 Giant Growth and 1 Locust and then keep that in there. And then this is the deck. Seems more than good enough to me. I forgot to put my spider in here. Let me fill that in real quick. What are we cutting for the spider? I did just talk myself out of combat tricks, but this isn't even necessarily a combat trick, because this is also just like a huge life point swing. If we're getting like beaten down and then stabilizing by playing a Baloth isn't enough of playing a 4/4 and gaining 4, then I could just then crack back and gain another 6. And draw a card in the process. Yeah, maybe triple Boulder Branch is a little much. Sure, I'll cut one of those. Keep this Moment of Defiance, and I really want to try it out with all these big creatures. Might be living in Magical Christmas Land there. Maybe I should cut the Moment. Actually, yeah, I mean, I probably should. It's a 3-mana combat trick. I want to be dumping all my mana and just casting more creatures in this deck. I'm trying to put more in here, not cut them. Okay, now we have a deck. Alright, here we have a look at the final deck, the very first Brothers War sealed deck that I'll be playing with on Arena. This is for the Midweek Magic Phantom Sealed Event. A very fun green-black ramp deck here. We've got a Cradle Clear Cutter as a 3-mana 1/3 that taps for green, and a Pristine Talisman, 3-mana Mana Rock that taps for a mana, and a Gix's Caress, providing us with a Powerstone. So 3-mana cards that ramp us up into casting our artifacts a turn sooner to try to get to cards like Rust Goliath, a 10-mana 10/10 Reach Trample, Iron Claw Crusher, 7-mana 4/6, gives something +4/+0 every time it attacks, and some Boulder Branch Golems, 7 mana 6/5s that gain 6 life when they hit the board. And all 3 of these are flexible to where if we're getting beat down and we don't have the mana to cast the full card, we can play the cheaper version and just get blocking in the early game. So really like our late game stuff to ramp into, and plenty of interaction in here. We have Gix's Command, Skyfisher Spider, and 2 Powerstone Fractures. We also have Epic Confrontation, so a lot of good ways to kind of keep our opponent off of their game plan with some removal there, and even some discard with the Gix's Caress. This doesn't only give us a Power Stone, it also pulls our opponent's best card out of their hand, so pretty solid looking deck here, and I'm very excited to see how it plays as we head into the gameplay. So here we are in game 1 on the play. We do have a black source from Evolving Wilds. I don't have a ton going on in this hand, if I'm being honest. But it is not bad enough to mulligan. We have both of our colors. We have something to do on turn 1, turn 2, and turn 3. Even if those plays aren't massive, they're definitely enough to get the game started and keep us in the game against more aggressive hands from our opponent. So we have our plays lined up for the first few turns, and we just need to draw into something big to close out the game. And we know how much big stuff our deck has. I don't remember if I have any Unearth in this deck. I don't think I do. I do have a tiny bit. I have 1 Unearth card. A single Unearth card, no other graveyard shenanigans. I guess I'll just mill my opponent. Would highly recommend very rarely milling your opponent in this format because there is a lot of Unearth and graveyard synergies. Gnawing Vermin is the kind of card you should almost always just put in your deck if you have a few Unearth cards and just any other graveyard recursion, and then just always mill yourself with it. But I thought I had a little more Unearth than I did. And seeing a forest from my opponent, there's not a lot of Unearth and green. The main Unearth colors, I believe, are black, white, and red. And black, of course, has a lot of other graveyard synergies outside of the Unearth mechanic that can be pretty scary. White does as well. White has some graveyard recursion in this set that brings back mana value 3 or less creatures. So if your opponent's on like black-white, just straight up never mill them. Seems like a pretty horrible idea. Play a 2/5 Ironclaw Crusher, and that does get pretty aggressive here. 5 mana in hand, I need to wait 3 more turns minimum to get to the big expensive version. I'm just gonna roll this one out. 4 mana 4/5 on attacks. All by itself here. If we draw another big prototype artifact, we'll just hold it in the hand for now. Perimeter Patrol, aggressive swing, sure. Color Frontliner if I block with Vermin, but I can also use Vermin with Powerstone Fracture to kill that later. Ooh, Mask of the Jadecrafter, that's going to be a big creature in the future. Probably want to get that thing on the board here. So we're attacking with a 4/5. And I'm going to slam down a Death Toucher now to block the Perimeter Patrol if it attacks too scary again. And play the Mask of the Jadecrafter so I can spend all of my mana into making an XX next turn. And this is the one Unearth card in our deck, so it's not even great to get it in our grave in the early game, because we want a lot of mana when we unearth it. We want the 3 mana to unearth it, and a gigantic amount of extra mana for the X. So that's why I really was like, milling ourselves with Gnawing Vermin doesn't do too much for us. Even if we do hit the one Unearth card in the entire deck, it doesn't really do anything till quite late in the game. Alright, I'm very okay with this. Snap block here, because we have a Powerstone Fracture for their next gigantic creature. So even if they're trying to bait me into getting the Death Toucher off the board, I've got a response to their gigantic creature. Alright, looks like it might just be reanimation there. Return the perimeter patrol. Gix's command. I do not have double black right now, though. I am running an even split 8-8 here, because I've got some double greens like Iron Claw Crushers. Just make a 5-5. This seems fine. Make a 5-5, pass the turn. 5-5 can trade into the perimeter patrol. If I attack with the Iron Claw Crusher here, it's going to be a 4-5, so it'll just be blocked by both of them, and I only kill the 4-4 with it. That does not feel like a great attack to me. Swiftfoot Boots, gonna get some hexproof now. That I'm very much not a fan of, because now our Powerstone Fracture is gonna have a hard time killing their next massive creature. If that is their plan here. The opponent's down to only one card left in their hand, so I'm very okay with making that trade. It's another recommission. Well, that's awkward. 2 mana off from this golem. Can Powerstone Fracture basically nothing. Yeah, we just need more lands here. I definitely have the cards in hand to win this game. I'm actually going to attack with Crusher here, because we know they get to put another artifact on board and make the patrol a 5-4 on their next attack. So it's not going to block well anyway, and if I can get rid of the perimeter patrol, we know they have no more cards in hand, so we know they're out of threats if that one dies. Yeah, if I can get the second swamp for Gix's command, I think I've got this game on lock. I can blow up their perimeter patrol and bring 2 creatures from my grave back to hand. Or I could just make the Crusher a 4-power lifelinker, which means it would attack as an 8-power lifelinker that turn. And then on every future turn, it'll just attack as an 8-power creature, period. Give them a chump here. And trample, okay. I was going to say, very unnecessary combat trick, but I forgot that card gives it like 4 different abilities. Hexproof, Indestructible, Reach, and Trample. Trample being the important one there. So we take a bunch of damage even though we blocked. But they're out of cards. Another Powerstone Fracture against the Hexproofer. Swamp is lethal on the spot. So let's just play it really safe here, gain a little bit of life. Could have used Butcher's ability instead. Have them lose 2 more life here, go down to 3. But I'm just going to play it really safe against like another trample trick or something like that. Go up to 12. That is not a swamp. Alright, well, we're on the Butcher plan. Butcher kills him in 3 turns. That's better than making a 3-3 right now. Tukesh's Onulet. Well, that's a problem. That can gain them a couple more life when it leaves the battlefield. So what do we want to do here? I could just not block. How does this work? Sack a creature they control with the highest power, so they'd sack the patrol. So I can't get rid of Onulet as a blocker. Use Powerstone Fracture to do that, but losing a good creature to do so. I think I'm going to just take this for now, but it's not because I think I can get lethal next turn. Although it is possible. Just a little difficult. Oh wait, no, I'm really bad at math right now. I just have straight lethal on board. Right? No, not quite. They're forced into double blocks here. 1 block on each creature. They can kill that one and chump block this one is what's going on. If I attack with both, I kill their tower worker but lose my boulder branch golem, so I would rather just play it long. Battlefield Butcher MVP this game. This card's single-handedly going to take it for us. Ridiculous activated ability. Another Onulet. So just got to make sure we don't kill those, and they are dead next turn. As long as I get to untap with this card and they're out of cards in hand, so I can guarantee that happens. We've got it on lock. Nice little chump block here. Make them lose 2 life, untap, and then make them lose the last 2 life, and that'll be game. No second black mana, no problem. Battlefield Butcher takes it for us, just carves up the competition. See our first random rare reward from the Midweek Magic Event. And it is going to be a mythic rare. Elspeth Resplendent from Streets of New Capenna. That's super spicy. Very, very cool reward. Can't be unhappy with that. That is sweet. Here we are in game 2 on the play. Thraxidemon turn 2, Perimeter Patrol turn 3. Very keepable hand here. I'm going to hold on to Evolving Wilds. That's probably wrong because I've got a 2, 3, 4, 5 curve if I just use it right now. I only have 1 double black card in the deck. And it's the command. And if I get the green source, I can Rust Goliath on 5 if I need to. Alright, a little awkward. Drew another green source. The Cradle Clear Cutter can be used as a green source. Deadly Riposte. Goodbye, Thraxidemon. 3/3 or Mana Dork. 3/3 or Mana Dork. I'll play the 3/3 here. I can still keep hitting my opponent really aggressively. Worst case scenario, next turn I play the Clear Cutter, hit my opponent for 4. I guess they could also just use removal on it. That's not bad at all. Get the removal spells out of the way for all these bigger creatures. Yeah, if I hit a land, I just play the Obstinate Baloth instead. Alright. Exile the 3/3. Sure thing. Ooh, Gix's Caress. Very tempting. I get perfect information on what my opponent has in hand, and I basically get another mana just like I would with the Clear Cutter, so let's do it. Recommission, Boulder Branch Golem, Supply Drop, Ambush Paratrooper, Stone Retrieval Unit. I don't really want to bring back a small card, because then they can recommission it, so it's like the Stone Retrieval Unit or the Boulder Branch Golem. So just hit the Boulder Branch Golem. Drawn to a Survivor of Corliss. 1 mana away from casting Clear Cutter on 6, so I'm going to Obstinate Baloth here. If I can cast Clear Cutter for 6 mana, then that gives me enough mana to cast absolutely everything because it's tapping for 3 green. Ooh, no. Takaji's Welcome is a ridiculously good card off the top for our opponent that draws them a card every time a creature with mana value 3 or less enters the battlefield under their control. Luckily, they've already cast all of those. Yeah, they have none left, but that can really draw them a lot of cards if they draw well off the top here. Let's hope they don't. So we're at 9 mana now. We can definitely play a Boulder Branch Golem next turn, and if I hit a land, Then I get to play Rust Goliath, and that will be awesome. Powerstone Engineer, very good draw for our opponent, immediately triggers the Tokaji's Welcome. Gives them another card, but very good draw for us as well. Rust Goliath. To come on in hot here. The triple block. Alright, we get to kill everything here. Absolutely take it. And then plop down a 10-10 trample on the empty board. Get on out there, Rust Goliath. And unless our opponent just top-decked removal, they've already cast their Legions to Ashes. So hopefully the Rust Goliath sticks around. It'll trample over for at least 8 on this current board. Alright, I've got the 7 mana to cast the Golem without the Clear Cutter, so I get to attack with both here. They have a supply drop for +2/+2, but that's not enough to kill either of these. They're going to use it to stop some of the trample damage, maybe? Oh no, it is enough to block without dying there, I suppose. But now here's a 6/5. Gain 6. Just big green monsters. Sacrifice the supply drop to draw a card. And they are going to scoop them up. Gigantic green monsters take it that game. Some really fun ramp stuff going on for us there. And we're going to be 2-0, grabbing our second random rare reward. What do we got, Midweek Magic? Kanata, Dawn Crowned. Very cool card. This was a huge combo piece for a while in constructed formats. I don't know if it is now. I don't pay a massive amount of attention to like standard, and certainly not alchemy. But I do know enough to know that this used to be a card that I don't know what it synergized with, but there was some big X mana spell where like X targets get this or whatever. And because this makes it cost 1 less for each target, you could cast it on like a million different targets and cast it for super cheap. So cool little combo piece there. Very fun card. But now we are competing for the biggest prize, in my opinion, the mystery cosmetic, because I'm primarily a limited player, so more cards getting added to the collection on Arena don't matter too much to me. What does matter is maybe getting some cool card sleeves, avatars, pets, anything like that. The mystery cosmetic is just a completely random cosmetic from the entirety of cosmetics on Arena, as far as I know, because I have gotten an avatar from it before. I've gotten a card sleeve from it before. More often than not, though, because there is a parallax card style for almost every single card on Arena, you're going to get a parallax card style. So the lottery of mystery cosmetics here is just me crossing my fingers, hoping I don't get a parallax card style. Those are the 3D effect looking card styles. I'm just not a huge fan of those. So let's see. Hopefully we get a super sweet mystery cosmetic and maybe even a 3-0 here. All right, a very keepable hand here. Not too much going on late game, but we've got to turn to Blanchwood Prowler to make sure that we draw more lands. We have a Gix's Caress to get that Powerstone to get towards casting a 6 mana Warplow and a 7 mana Golem a little quicker. Ashnod's Harvester from our opponent. Luckily, we don't really care too much about what's in our grave, so I'm pretty okay to just drop down the Prowler and trade. Oh, Rust Goliath is gone forever because we don't have Graveyard Recursion, and even if we did, our opponent can just exile it with the Harvester. Sad mill there. Certainly happens. They're going to disfigure our 1/1 so they can get in with their 3/1, fair enough. Very aggressive start to this game for our opponent. Not a fan of that. Now it's going to be pretty hard to take a turn off playing Gix's Caress and not putting a creature on board, because that's just going to open the field for my opponent to hit me for 4 damage next turn, put me down to 13 really quickly. So I might have to just play this Goring Warplow. Doesn't feel ideal. take 4 damage, go to 13, then I play an Iron Claw Crusher next turn as a 2/5. 2/5 is a pretty great blocker for the board state. Opponent's stuck on 2 mana. This is risky, but opponent's stuck on 2 mana, so Gix's Caress, take any 2-drop out of their hand. Should be fine. And they need 6 mana to bring this Transmigrant back, so we'll get rid of that. It can come back from grave eventually, but opponent is stuck on 2 mana here, so that won't happen for quite some time. Just make every play we can to slow them down in their early game. They do have a weak Stone Subjugation to keep in mind. For 4 mana, they can use this to lock down whatever creature we play. Alright, so opponent goes ahead and draws a card off the Courier and then brings it back to still get a damage in this turn. I'm pretty cool with that. They unearthed it on a turn where they don't have the 2 mana to draw another card off of it. Skyfisher Spider is going to be an excellent way to use this Powerstone later in the game to clear out one of their big creatures. And let's just play a 2/5 here. Big enough blocker, the 3/1 does not get in anymore. Unless they hit a land. If they do have a land here, they get to tap down the Iron Claw Crusher. Or put a Menace equipment on the Ashnod's Harvester. Unfortunately for us, our opponent's got 2 lands in a row there. Blackblade Reforged is not a problem until they have 7 mana. Then it's a huge problem. But for now, we're not worried. By the time they have 7 mana, we should be pretty stable with all this stuff. There's a Dredging Claw. That gives +1/+0 and Menace to whatever they equip it to. And whenever something comes back from their grave, they can equip it for free. 6 mana here, probably time to play a 5/4 Death Touch, I would think. Get in for 4 damage. 1 mana away from Boulder Branch to gain a bunch of life. Can be really safe. So I am opening myself up to take some damage here, because they can spend 4 mana to tap down the Warplow, or they can spend 2 mana to put the Claw onto the Harvester, but I'm only going to take 3 or 4 damage here, and I get the removal spell out of the way potentially. Alright, they are going to removal spell the Crusher, maybe removal spell on Crusher, and then Dredging Claw on Harvester to get in for 4. That looks like the plan. So the Warplow is home free then, it's not going to get locked down. And I've got a very good thing to sacrifice for the Skyfisher Spider. Alright, still plenty of life gain here. Fortunately not enough for the 7 mana Boulder Branch, but we'll just play a bunch of Obstinate Baloths, and that should be really hard for our opponent to race as well. The life gain coming in very clutch after our opponent's aggressive start to this game. My whole graveyard is gone. Opponent has 5 mana up, so they can flash in their 3/3 flyer and get a Powerstone from it. They can use that Powerstone to reanimate the Transmigrants or to equip a Blackblade. And there we go, the 7 mana we need to drop down a Boulder Branch Golem and be very safe life total wise. Gain 6 here, back up to 15. Opponent is not gaining any life, they probably have to make a chump block here. So there's the Koilos Rock that gives them the Powerstone. If they draw land next turn, they will have 7 mana. Which is enough to put a Blackblade on something, but that would require all of their mana to do that, and it wouldn't be enough damage to kill me. Especially if they chump block, because we are going to gain 6. Go back up to 15. Involuntary cooldown, alright. Tap down 2 of our creatures and put some stun counters on them, and now an Altar of Dementia. They can sacrifice creatures to mill somebody equal to the sacrifice creature's power. Really, really scary card in Sealed, because if you get into a long game like that other game where I was using the Butcher, then eventually if you just get to a point where you have like 20 power on the board, you just mill your opponent's entire library. Like say I had an Altar of Dimension my sealed pool, 10 plus 7, I'd mill them 17 cards right now if I wanted. So it can be pretty horrifying. Luckily our opponents really only got the one creature here. And it's not scary enough to need to blow it up, so I'm just gonna keep playing life gainers and attacking in here. Save my 2 removal spells for a position where a removal spell is going to immediately give me lethal. I maybe could have won this game earlier if I went for more aggressive, less defensive lines. I've been pretty much casting my life gain spells every single turn that I can, but I could have cast a Skyfisher Spider earlier to blow up the Weak Stone subjugation. Totally forgot about that. That aspect of the spider. It can blow up any non-land permanent, so it can blow up enchantments. So that was a possibility. Although I guess to blow up the subjugation, I would have had to sacrifice another one of my creatures anyway. So I sack one creature to save a different creature. Yeah, it wouldn't really matter. Opponent has Altar of Dementia and Millstone. Some scary mill cards, but gonna be a little too late here. We have 22 cards in the library. They can mill 10 of them, because they can mill 2 from Millstone, and then 4 from Harvester, reanimate it with the Unearth effect, and 4 from Harvester again, because the Dredge and Claw automatically equips to anything that they unearth. Yep. Some cool synergies from our opponent, but luckily for us, just big green life gainers in particular really going to win us the game there. Really showing off the power of just consistent like power toughness creatures with life gain abilities stacked onto them to help you stabilize against a more aggressive starts from your opponent. Really cool stuff from the Obstinate Baloths and the Boulder Crush or Boulder Branch Golem. Excellent stuff. Really nice 3-0 Midweek Magic Phantom Sealed run today. Let's find out what our mystery cosmetic is. Fingers crossed, everybody. Anything but a Parallax card style. It is a Parallax card style. It is a 3D effect on a Thopter mechanics. That's a thing. It is going to be pretty rare to get a non-Parallax card style again, because there's like 300 per set. So there's just so many more Parallax card styles as cosmetics than anything else in the cosmetic pool. But yeah, super fun stuff. I've been absolutely loving this set so far. I'll be playing plenty more in the near future. If you're looking forward to any more drafts or seals, I've got tons of videos of the Brothers War format coming to this channel on a daily basis very, very soon. No huge over or underperformers in the deck. I think everything was great. Gnawing Vermin's a little bit of an underperformer, just because we don't have really any graveyard recursion or graveyard mechanics for the self-mill that we can use with this card. But 1 mana 1/1, giving something -1/-1 when it dies is still fine. So that was probably the worst card in the deck. Battlefield Butcher was phenomenal in that one game. The Baloths were phenomenal. Boulder Branch Golem phenomenal. Everything was pretty sweet. I guess the biggest underperformer was Gix's Command, just because I didn't get to cast it. I milled it in one game, and then I had only one Black Source in another. But I stand by that card. Is tremendously powerful. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you all enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed playing this video. If you want to catch more videos like this, you can like, comment, and subscribe to let the YouTube algorithm know to send some more of these videos to you in your recommended feeds. But as always, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.